Okay, this is the final video in this series. This is the 11th and final one, part 10. And what I'm going to concentrate on here is finishing this by drawing the shirt. And so if you haven't watched my fabric fold video, you may want to watch that too, because I go through the basics in that video. Now with this 4B pencil that I'm going to use here, I'm just pretty much going to start darkening in the areas. And this is just preliminary now. I'm finding all the shadow areas, and I want to get them marked with some graphite. And a 4B is a good dark graphite, but not too dark. And it will lighten out when I start to blend. So I want to get that in there. And I'm looking at the reference photo as I'm doing that. It's off to the left. And I'm just kind of going over. Right now it's going to be somewhat cartoonish because, you have the white of the paper, the white of the paper, and you have the dark of the pencil, and you don't really have any midtones. And so it looks like lines, and that kind of gives it a little more cartoonish look. But as we start to blend this out with a blender, it will start to diffuse and then look more natural. Here I'm going to a lighter pencil because I'm going to get into some of the shade areas where the light, there's a little bit of shadow. It's not as dark as where the creases are that I did with the 4B. So I just want to get some of that in there too. Now I'm doing this in double time because there's just so much to cover here, and I can only talk so much. So I've got this at double speed, but I believe you should be able to see what I'm doing even at double speed. Now I'm taking a paper blender, and here I'm just going to start to diffuse everything, kind of blend it in. And this is usually the process with everything that I do, is I put down graphite, and then I'll blend. And then I'll take a kneaded eraser and I'll lift, certain lighter areas out, or areas that maybe I went too dark and I want to lighten it up. And then I'll do the process all over again. So here I am continuing to blend, so that you notice the real dark shadow areas are now lightening up. So I'll likely have to go in there again and add a little more darkness to it. But this is the process. This is the layering process. So you can see that everywhere that I had put the dark 4B and the 2B is now lightened up because of this paper blender. The shirt itself is a white shirt, and the black and white photograph that I'm using, it's a very, very white shirt. However, you don't want to just leave the white of the paper. It just never looks right to leave the white of the paper, with the exception of various highlights like the gleam of an eye, or maybe the glint off of teeth, or something where you have this really bright reflection. That's the only time I would want to have the white of the paper showing. Other than that, I'm going to diffuse that because nothing is really going to be white. There's always going to be some real, at least minor tone to it, even if the eye doesn't immediately pick it up. These are things that you need to keep an eye for and make sure. So now I'm going in with the kneaded eraser after the blending, and I'm going to lighten up these areas that is white on the photo. And also I'm shaping the shading areas, giving it a little more matching to what I see in the reference photo. So you can go in there as long as you draw lightly, you can always pull it out. And that's what I like to do is I'll go in there, and if I'm a little sloppy, I can go back with the kneaded eraser and I can start to pull out some of the graphite in the shadow areas and shape it to match that I see in the reference photo. Now I'm taking a hard charcoal pencil here because I had drawn this jacket in charcoal because that's about as black as I can get, and it's a very, very black suit. And I want to use the hard charcoal because I want a sharper edge for that jacket around the shirt. And so that's why I went along there to get it was kind of a messy edge, and I wanted to sharpen that up a little bit. And now again, I'm pulling out the lighter areas, which is allowing me to shape the bright and shadowed areas of this shirt. And there's not much to this right now, but as we progress along in this video, you'll start to see everything starting to take shape and starting to look more realistic as a shirt that has these folds in them. Okay, now I want to kind of get into the darker areas within the shade itself. And so I'm using a 7B pencil from my Staedtler Mars Lumograph 100 pencils because it has a little bit of carbon mixed with the graphite, which I really like. It's kind of like the 9XXB pencil, but it's just one grade lighter in the Lumograph line. And you can see where I'm just getting kind of the darker parts of the shadow in there using this pencil. And again, as usual, I will go in and I will diffuse this with a blender. But I always lay down some graphite, get in the areas that I think needs even darker, and then blend. And that's pretty much, if you can get that sequence pretty much in your mind, it will help you out as you're drawing. Just remember, lay down value, blend, and then make any kind of corrections along the way with your kneaded eraser or whatever. And then what you use to blend with, of course, is up to you, and experiment with what each blender does. I'm using a paper blender in this particular initial part of this drawing, but you'll also see me come in there later with a cotton swab and so forth. So as you can see, I'm going into the shadowed areas where the folds are, and then I should be coming in here with, there it is, my paper blender, and I'm going to start diffusing again. Because normally when you have folds, you don't have really, really sharp creases. You might, and of course you need to account for that, but in this case, in his shirt, he doesn't have any real sharp creases. He has these mild folds. And so we definitely want to take that into account when adding the shadows, because they'll go from dark into mid-tone into light, and it should be kind of a gradual rolling type appearance. And you should start to notice now that the shirt is starting to take on the appearance of these folds, although it's still very rough. It's very rough. And it's one of the things about doing these drawing tutorials is, I kind of imagine from the standpoint of, you, the viewer, that you might be looking going, well, that still doesn't look quite like, a realistic shirt. And I have to kind of bear with it that that's probably what's being thought. But you have to, keep it in mind that this is a process. And when you're drawing, it's going to be the same thing. Initially, when you start drawing things, it's going to look cartoonish. And then the more you work it, it's going to start taking on realistic form. You see, I'm getting into the areas where there's light going onto the shirt, which is going to be at the top of the folds. And as I do this, you're going to start noticing the improvement, little by little, of what I'm doing. And it's a matter of getting those highlights in there, lighting up certain areas, making corrections, which you're going to do a lot. You're going to make all kinds of corrections. There's creases there that are too thick that I'm going to thin out as I progress. And like right there, for example, I'm going to start thinning that out a little bit because that definitely is too dark and too thick of a line for that crease. But I put the value down first, and now I can work it down to the shape that I want. And here I'm kind of lighting up as I go up along the neck. Now, as it gets closer to the back of his neck, it's going to need to stay darker. So I'm going to have to blend that gradually back down again. But I'm taking some of that value out so that I can work that graduation with my blender. And here I'm using the cotton swab to do just that. So everything is gradual. It just doesn't go straight from dark area to light area, but it's more of a gradual progression from one stage to the other. Okay, so I'm going to continue with the blending here and pulling stuff out. The process is just kind of duplicated. You're adding graphite, then you're blending or diffusing, and then you're going in and you're taking some off with an eraser. Now here I used the Tombow 100 because I found that I had grounded in some of that graphite into the paper that I couldn't even lift with the kneaded eraser, and that's a problem that you have to be careful about, and I mess up sometimes doing that. So I lifted it up, then I have to lay it down again, and you want to make sure you lay it down lightly enough so that you don't grind the graphite into the paper and you can't lift it. Now, looks like I'm going to use my 4B pencil here just to kind of bring out some of those creases again, because you tend to blend it out and it takes out the real darkest areas. And also I'm shading out from the creases themselves, which gives it the more soft rolling form that you want. Because if otherwise you have really hard creases if you don't kind of start lighting your shading as you go towards the light. And so that's something that I'm doing here is kind of going in and re-emphasizing the folds, but then I'm going to lighten it as I go out of those shadow areas more into the light. And then again with the kneaded eraser, you can come in there and you can thin out areas that may be too dark. You can go in there and thin out the width of the crease itself, the shadow area. You could just compare it to the reference and see that, okay, it's a little too wide, it's a little too dark. And that's the beauty of using these kneaded erasers or these other eraser tools, is that you can just keep coming in there and shaping the drawing or the graphite as you go along. So here I'm going to add some more material. I'm using the 7B again. The 7B with the Staedtler Mars Lumograph has carbon in it, so you can get some really good darks, but you have to be careful with it because of the carbon does not come off the paper as easy as the graphite. So you need to be more deliberate as to where you apply it, that you don't really expect to be taking too much of it off with your erasers, because it does tend to be a little more permanent than the graphite itself. And of course you always want to go in there and you want to put it in as lightly as possible. You don't want to press it into the paper. That's always a no-no. And so here I am. Now this is a part where I didn't do what I wanted to do. There's going to be a shadow between the neck and the edge of the shirt. But I made the shadow too dark, and this actually turned out to be an outline of the shirt itself. And so during the process of this video, you're going to see that I'll be working it to lighten up that shadow and blending it more into the neck, the tone of the neck, so that it isn't as harsh, and it will look more as a separation of the shirt and the neck. It'll be more 3D as opposed to looking like the outline of a shirt, like you would have in a coloring book. You have these black lines that you're supposed to draw in between. You never want your photo to, your drawing to look like that. So you can see I've diffused it somewhat, and I'm going to probably diffuse it a lot more than that, I would imagine. I don't recall, but I'm pretty sure I would, because I would not be satisfied with that right now. But you just go back and forth, and you clean up areas that you can see that you went a little bit too far. You can also go in there and start shaping the shadow. See, I'm going to shape that shadow to what I see happening on the reference photo. And again, I'm blending, so you don't go, have these really harsh lines from the shadow going right into the light, but more of a subtle blend or a subtle gradient from light to mid-tone to dark. So that's what blending is so good for. Okay, so still some more tune-up here. Shaping it. I want some nice highlights where the shirt is more in the light. Get more of the white of the shirt to start showing up. I'll start thinning out the creases. I have to be real careful back here because that's supposed to be the darkest area, so I don't want too much light getting back there. I want more of the light to be in the front of the shirt as opposed to the back. So you'll notice the front of the shirt being lighter, and then as it goes to the back, I have it gradually getting darker, and that's what I want to achieve, because there is less light back there. Here I am just, okay, I'm gonna continue shaping these fabric folds. I'm going to continue lighting up the shadow areas and thinning it out where it may look a little too thick. Add a little more highlight to the areas. I want more of the white of the shirt to come out. So this is a back and forth process. Now each time I pull that kneaded eraser back off the camera, what I'm doing is I'm reshaping that point with a new clean point, and I'm looking at my reference photo to compare and make sure that I'm getting the right tone for that crease. If I think that the shadow is a little too dark or too thick, I'm going to start taking some of that graphite off and start bringing it more and more in line with what I see in my reference. So it's a matter of adjusting, and always look at your reference photo. Don't make the mistake many do, including me in the beginning, and that is, you keep drawing without looking at the reference photo because you think you know what it should look like. Forget what you think it should look like. Draw what you actually see. That is really key. Draw what you actually see and just fight against the tendency in your mind to want to draw it the way you think it should be. Now you can see that the fabric is starting to take shape. There's still more to do, but it's starting to take shape. Now I'm just going to start working a little bit on the other side here. There's less shadows and creases on this side. But if you were to see the reference photo, although at first you might think that the color looks very white in the reference photo, there is this very subtle change in tone, ever so lightly. I mean, it's like going from a 10H pencil to the white area. A 10H pencil hardly registers on the paper. And what I'm doing here with this blender is I'm kind of marking the areas where this very subtle change in tone occurs. And then I'll go in and modify it and make changes to it by removing some of the graphite and then blending it in, and removing some more, just like I did on the other side. So I'm using a 2B pencil here because I do have this little crease here that it has a really good shadow that needs to be put in there, because that's what's in the reference photo. That's what I'm going to put there. I could get away with just not having anything there and just, you know, go straight into the edge of that jacket, but I want to duplicate what I see in the reference photo. And that's what I would advise if you're going to, you know, practice realistic drawing, which I call all my drawings practicing, because I really don't feel that I'm there to where I want to be yet. And so I need to be sure that I am drawing exactly what I see. Now, excuse me. Here again, I'm working in the shadow. The shadow differentiates between the shirt and the neckline. There's going to be this little dark crease in there. And again, like I had mentioned on the other side of the neck, that you have to be really careful that you don't get so dark that it just looks like you're outlining the shirt like a coloring book. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start blending more into the neck. You can see that I'm doing that with the pencil. I'll start to shade away from the shirt and lighten my touch of the pencil. And this way, it doesn't look like I'm creating a harsh line to outline the shirt, but it's more of a shadow being created by the collar of the shirt onto the neck. Now what I'm showing here is I have a 4B mechanical pencil, and the beauty of this, notice that I can get a very, very thin line. And so I'm trying this thing out here, and I like what I see. It's giving me a nice separation from the shirt, because I want a 3D effect that there is actually a shirt there, a shirt collar, as opposed to just going from a drawing into a white area. And then I'm going to get into diffusing that, blending it in to my neck. A little shadow comes up over the collar edge, so I'm getting that in there. Be careful not to do a ring around the collar. Okay, now that's a 2H pencil. It's a very light pencil. And so here I'm going to kind of come out into the collar itself, because like I had mentioned earlier in this tutorial, you really don't have the white of the paper. You need some tone. And you can see I'm getting the creases, or the little changes in gradation from the light onto this drawing here using this 2H pencil, because there's not a whole lot of creases on this side of the collar as it is on the other side. And I'll blend that out, but right now I'm just looking at that reference and noting where the subtle differences, and I mean really subtle differences, between the white of the reference and the ever so small hint that there's just something there that isn't white, but looking at it from a distance, you may not notice it, but drawing it, you do need to notice everything. And so you can see that I'm adding this value coming out into the white of the collar ever so lightly and blending it, so it does give the impression that you do have some waves of that collar, as opposed to it being flat, because nobody has a flat collar. And then here I'm going to diffuse it with my cotton wick again. Touch-ups. I could see areas where I smudged a little bit too much, or I may have a little bit too dark. I'm going to do some diffusing. And you know, this is just you're seeing as I'm doing this, I'm not skipping anything. I only have it at double speed, but you're seeing me when I'm correcting my errors, when I'm every little thing that I'm doing that had I done it right the first time, I wouldn't need to go back and do what I'm doing. So these are just things that you may come across, and I want to make sure that it's included in here so that you can see that I am constantly fixing things as I go along, because I find that just doesn't look right. See, so now I'm really improving the area between the shirt collar and the neck, whereas I'm diffusing that shadow area by darkening around the neck a little bit more and moving into the neck more, because I could afford to do so according to my reference photo. And that way it diffuses that line, and it doesn't look like a harsh line separating the shirt from the neck. And I'm actually liking what I see here. It looks very natural, and it's not only helping the shirt look more realistic, shirt collar, but actually the neck's starting to improve a little bit too, because it could have used a little bit more of this material, the graphite that I'm putting on there, and then I'm blending it as I go more towards the center, so you don't see any harsh changes. So everything starts to look real natural, as you can see, or I hope you agree, because it does to me. Coming from the neck, collar line into the neck area. And so these are just adjustments that you make along the way to make sure that everything looks realistic. And that neck skin looks really good to me. I really like the way it came out. And I like now that it does look like it's separated from the collar of the shirt. And again, I'm giving the shirt a little bit of tone, because you don't want it to be just white, white. Otherwise, it's a 2D effect rather than the 3D effect that you want to achieve. And so if you stand back and you look at these little subtle areas that I'm adding this 2H eraser to, and then coming in with my kneaded eraser, 2H pencil, and then coming in with my 2H pencil, you can start seeing where you have this thick fold right at the neckline, and then it kind of goes back down again. I'm giving this illusion that you actually have this folded material at the collar line rather than it just being flat white. And it's just ever so subtle. Just notice how subtle those changes are, but that your eyes can pick up on it. You can see the highlight areas, the mild shading areas, and there you go. You have some fabric there, some more touch-up, shaping, the little edge for that little fold there. You got yourself a shirt collar. So still the 2H pencil. It's a very light pencil, so I can afford to go into areas here, giving it that ever so subtle wrinkle to the shirt. Very subtle wrinkles.